Abbruzzino, and I am here at the South Jetty in Venice, Florida, and I am here today with candidate for City Council, Ron Smith. I'm going to do a disclaimer that should be in writing on there. One is that I am a Republican and I am a committee man in the REC. Ron is a Democrat, and I can say it because I'm not in the race. They can't discuss what they are between him and Rick Howard. My group has targeted him, and I said if he wants to bring it up, it's up to him. That has not been something I've agreed to. It's something that I guess the executives at the REC have decided. The Rick Howard is a Republican in my party, and I asked him for the interview. He basically blew me off. I got him at the library, and he just said no and turned away. The biggest issue I'm seeing with a lot of my fellow Republicans is, do we cross the party line because we're concerned with all of the mailing, thousands and thousands of dollars that are being spent by Florida First Initiative, the Pat Neal Influence PAC, to prop up Rick Howard. Same thing as we're seeing with Nick Pachota. So, with that being said, I'm going to allow Ron to introduce himself, and any questions that are thrown out there, I said anything's on the table. I'm going to share why he's doing that, so I'm going to seem distracted over here. So go ahead, Ron.
Hi, I'm Ron Smith, and I'm running for seat number 5 against Rick Howard. I thought of it as an open seat when I signed up for this, but I soon found out it wasn't an open seat. There's a developer named Pat Neal who really is the incumbent and believes that he gets to pick who serves on the council. You might have seen news coverage that he tried to entice me to get out of the race and let his candidate win without opposition. When I refused to do that, he said, well, I'm going to put all my money on the other guy. I'm 38-3 when I back a candidate financially, and you don't have a chance. Well, I do have a chance, and that chance is that people can see through what's happening. It's happening in both city races. Neal's PAC is filling up mailboxes with flyers, sometimes negative flyers, sometimes puff pieces for the candidate of his choice. At any rate, I moved to Venice in 1981 for the first time to be local news editor at the Herald Tribune, and I've loved the city ever since. My daughter was born here at Venice Hospital in a brief period when they had a maternity ward. My wife, I lost a couple of years ago, is buried here. She was a quilter, very active in the quilt society here, and her quilt patterns are still sold downtown at the Quilting Patch. As the editor of the paper, I got to research, write, and oversee hundreds of articles about the history of this city. Everything from why we have all these shark's teeth to the history of the Ringling Brothers Circus when it was here, and to the origins of John Nolan's plan. I believe that we need to honor Nolan's great gift to us, and I'll fight for our historic buildings. I will try to preserve our unique downtown and our wonderful history. Thank you, Frankie, for having me here.
Nice to have you.
I look forward to the conversation.
Now, if you guys want, I do have it set up so I have another device here where I can take questions from anybody. So if you post a question, I'll try to keep checking it. So I'm going to open it up for you guys. If you have something, maybe I might miss something and you want to know a little bit more about it. Let me start with one thing here, and that's what I'm smelling right now, which is red tide.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on red tide, some of the environmental issues that we face here?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I put out my platform, the third element of it was that I want to preserve the paradise we live in by protecting the environment. I said I would concentrate on stormwater runoff, water quality, and water conservation. There was a task force, a statewide task force, that came up with recommendations 3 years ago on how to battle red tide, and people haven't acted on it. I think there were 8 recommendations, and we've only fully implemented 1. So I believe that it's necessary. I live in a condominium complex with 40 people. Most of them are seasonal residents, and they shouldn't have to call me and ask what's the red tide situation before deciding when they're going to come down here. It's really outrageous. I get frustrated that people say, well, we can't do anything about it because it's really a statewide problem or a regional problem, and the city alone can't do anything. Well, no, the city can do things about it, and the city council certainly should not feel helpless. We do have to monitor these outfalls. One of the things we did do, which is good, is we had a fertilizer ordinance, and it's hard to enforce, but it's certainly a start in the right direction. And we are responsible. Everybody wants to keep our beaches open. Everybody wants to keep our fisheries healthy, but we have to work at it.
So let me ask you this on the outfalls, and something I've been proactive on for years.
Mm-hmm.
They say, I was watching scientists, and they said that, well, the question is, why was it so focused around Venice and some other questions with the red tide? And they said one thing is that Hurricane Ian and all the runoff contributed significantly to the algae blooms. There has been one that was fixed. It was like a French dike system for about $1 million. What would you do as a councilman? Would you pursue resolving the issue with the other outfalls that have led to beach closures, like at Dog Beach and Caspos and the pier? What would you do in that regard?
No, absolutely. And there is, as I understand it, a study that's going on. I talked with the city engineer about the outfalls, and that other cities have managed that better. That's just one big pipe dumping the water straight in there, and I'm not an engineer, but I know that other cities have handled it better. I know they're studying redirecting some of the outfalls into the intracoastal, and I obviously would support that if that would, dilute this presence that contributes to red tide.
All right, what about Florida? Beautiful America, I think that's the name of the group, came out and said, look, Florida Natural Landscaping, that you guys aren't doing it. Now, I can tell you 3 years ago, it was something Bob Daniels, Hollick were pushing, and it kind of died down. They said, well, you need to start it back up. Would you be for something like that, where it's limiting a lot of the issues that, lead to polluted water running through the outfalls and into the Gulf, let's say?
No, absolutely. And, we have to have a program, and they have one, but they haven't really supported it sufficiently with trees, and the island lost a lot in this hurricane, and they've really got to get back on the ball there on a tree planting program. But the Florida Natural Vegetation, there was a great program on 60 Minutes recently about community to the south of us here that put in all natural vegetation, and they withstood the hurricane so much better than we did up here, because those plants are meant to survive, the winds and the hurricanes.
That's interesting. Let me ask you this. Have you been out to Alhambra Road, where the Ian erosion basically took away the road? I'm hearing it's about $1 million to fix. What's your view on that situation?
Well, obviously it has to be fixed. Along with any other damage from the storm. Hopefully we'll get some help on that from FEMA.
Okay.
I've been waiting for a final report on the damages from the storm, and hopefully insurance and FEMA are going to help us get through that, so that we don't have to use up the reserves we have. The city has a tremendous reserve. We have $40 million general fund for a year, and we have over $10 million in reserve. Enough for, a quarter of a year if we had no income. And if we're not having to use that up for this storm, then we can go ahead with something that I think you've talked about as well, with a millage rollback, because the city actually is in very good financial shape. Now, we need to check and make sure this storm hasn't changed that, but they have a tremendous amount of money in reserve. They're benefiting greatly from, the assessments that are rising, and for 6 years we've seen the assessments rise and the income to the city rise, and there's been no relief in terms of the tax millage rate. So that's something else that I am definitely focused on.
Now, there was a report that came out today, and I put it on my scoop page, about mobile homes and the issue they're run into with the city, which I was not aware of, and I don't know if you are. If you're not, that's fine. I wasn't until this morning, where basically, if they want basic electric and plumbing, it's fine to get it fixed. But if they want to put a window into their mobile home that was destroyed, and this was a mobile home park here in the city of Venice, they have to pay about $2,000 to hire an engineer to come out, analyze it, and give their opine. You know, this is our opinion. This is what you got to do, and which is hard for these mobile home seniors that are living paycheck to paycheck. So, what is your view on that?
Yeah, I was out there at Bay Indies when they had a meeting of the Homeowners Association, and I think there were 300 people in attendance, along with a couple of members of the council, the city manager, city police chief, fire chief, a building inspector, and they were crying for help. And I've since published in the Herald Tribune a proposal to give some relief in the form of a special fund that would cover building permit fees so that the residents don't have to have that on top of the repair costs. And there's a great discussion there of when you do need to upgrade to, you know, the hurricane standards that are in place now for new construction. And I believe that the rule is if you're more than 50% damage, that you're going to have to replace it with today's standards, not what was in effect years ago. Obviously, there are people with tremendous challenges. I was out at Bay Indies this morning, and it's cleaned up a little bit, but there's still a lot of people out there struggling. So.
Okay, now the millage rate. As you know, I'm well aware of that. It seemed like at the last forum where the candidates were up there, there was one of the sitting councilmen kind of made a mockery of the fact that should even be considered, even though Northport, City of Sarasota, Sarasota County are all 0.9 to 1.1% lower than the City of Venice. Why can these other entities do it and the City of Venice can't? And what are your thoughts? I believe at one point you said you were for looking into something like discounting it, lowering the millage rate.
I'm not just looking into it. I'm saying we need to do it.
Okay.
I've called for doing that. I did meet with the city finance manager. She went over the funding and that the reserves are at an all-time high. And, you know, they're very cautious and prudent, you know, and they managed the budget well to get to that situation. But now we're in a position where we can give a little relief. When I knock on doors and people tell me their taxes have gone up 50%, and you have a city council that says, well, we haven't raised the tax rate. Well, that's true, you haven't, but the taxes that the people are paying on the same house have increased over a period of the last 5 or 6 years by 50%. So obviously, the city needs to give some relief, and it's in a position to do it. Again, with one final check here to make sure we haven't put ourselves in a bad spot because of the hurricane, but I believe that we're covered with insurance and help from FEMA, and that we still are in a position to give some relief. The city's in great financial shape. There are reserves at the airport, even though they had some damage at the airport. There's $5 million in reserve at that airport because they have tremendous income from, you know, everything from the golf course to the mobile home park to the holiday apartments. Those are all things that pay money into the city, as well as the fixed base operator, as well as this new developer that's coming in with a hotel that's going to pay $300,000 a year to use that land over near the Salty Dog.
Yeah, now what are your thoughts on that? That's airport property. That you mentioned it. There's going to be I'm going off memory. It's been a few years now. I think it was Mike Miller's, I think, in charge of it, if memory serves me right. It's a hotel / restaurant / I think some shops.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that? Pro, con?
Yeah, well, it's a done deal.
Okay.
They've already signed the lease. Matter of fact, the city is pushing the developer to go ahead now, because they've had a lease that only had them paying $100,000 a year while they're in development, and it increases to $300,000 once the development's completed. So the city's given them notice that effective immediately, they're going to charge $200,000 a year while it's under construction, and in 1 year they're going to the full $300,000 that they're going to have to pay whether they develop it or not. So they're forcing them to either build or get out of the deal.
So you are up on the issue.
No, absolutely.
That's what I'm trying to do, is test you if you are.
I looked at the plan, and the plan is not only for a hotel, but by the way, they're not asking for a special exception, which you know is one of my big issues, and I want to talk about that because the city council gives out special exceptions like candy to their friends. But anyway, this developer is not asking for any special exception on height. They only build to what was programmed in that area, and they are going to build a hotel. they're going to build a 1,200 seat arena, which I think the city's going to love. It's going to be circus based because it's right there on the grounds of the old circus property. And they're going to let Tito, who has that facility down there where he teaches, on the trapeze and all that. They're going to let him have a presence there in that arena, but it's seat 1,200 people. It can be used for music and for other things. I was always sad that they knocked down the arena, which was once 5,000 seats. The only thing that doesn't sit well with me, and I don't think it's going to sit well with other people, is he's also planning to put in a Chick-fil-A franchise on that property facing onto Business 41. And as you know, we have this wonderful downtown and this wonderful island business community that is not involve franchises. It's all mom and pop type businesses. This is really going to break in there, and it worries me that then we'll have Burger King and we'll have Bojangles and everything else all along Business 41 there, and change the entire nature of the town. Now, how are we going to stop that? He already has the franchise, and it's zoned to allow that, I'm told. So he can do it, but that doesn't mean we don't have persuasion. It doesn't mean that we can't, as a council and as a community, convince him that it'd be better for him and for the whole island if he shied away from the Chick-fil-A franchise and went with some kind of a restaurant that's more in keeping with what our city is. Well, you weren't up on this Chick-fil-A thing?
The Chick-fil-A, I haven't heard that one, but it doesn't surprise me. Let me ask you this: if you got that auditorium, you got the auditorium at the high school. Our parks agreement is a 5-year. It was supposed to be a 5-year extension. It's supposed to end next year. I was told by the city manager it's 10-year, and then he sent me a document from 2011 to validate that, and never got back to me because I said, well, this is inaccurate. Something's not right. We all know. My understanding is 5 years, 2024. With that, I did some analysis and found out the community center is losing about $250,000 a year under the county. So here's the question to you. Let's say it is 5 years. There's disagreement over it. What will you start planning as soon as you get in, knowing how slow government works? What will you look at with that community center if it's not needed with the performing arts center and possibly this other 1,200 seat auditorium? Will you look into other options with the community center, or are you focused more on keeping the community center there and possibly trying to turn out some positive revenue flow from it?
Oh boy, I certainly am for getting into that early. There's some huge problems ahead, or opportunities ahead for the city, and we need to get into them now. The hospital, closing, and I've been talking, and I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, that it's not just the hospital property. Everything around the hospital that has been ancillary and medical offices and specialists are all moving out now to Laurel Road, and so you have a blight there that's like 3 or 4 blocks. We need to be strategizing. We need to be planning, brainstorming. What can we do with that neighborhood? We need to similarly be looking at the whole complex there where the community center is. There's so much more there with the library, and old Bessie is moving there, and of course we have the Triangle Inn, the museum there, and so it all has to be taken in together. I'm sure that there's tremendous opportunity there, but yes, we have to start to work on it now, not wait until like we did on some other things. We wait too long, and then our options are foreclosed. So.
Okay, what about something I see a lot since we're on community center, and that was once try to house some evacuees there. What would you do for the individuals that have concerns over an evacuation center not being here within the city of Venice? There's the closest one's Tyler Ranch and then Northport. Right. That's been a concern by a lot of individuals. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's my concern too. When I ask about it, they say, well, that's a county matter. The county's in charge of emergency facilities and all that. And so my answer to that is, well, then the city council needs a better relationship with the county. They need to be able to meet with them and talk about the need of the city and get them on board with us. And there's absolutely a need for an evacuation center that'll serve the people of Venice. Obviously, it can't be in a flood zone. But the city has its own emergency operations center that was ready for that storm. Maybe we need to go right beside that with a an evacuations facility. But clearly, the city, even if it cedes that responsibility to the county, it needs to be involved in the discussion of where we're going to do it and how we're going to do it.
Okay, another hot subject out there. And if you guys want to ask questions, go to my main scoop page. You can ask on there. I'm monitoring it. That's why I keep turning away. Affordable housing. That's something that a lot of people are asking about, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, and what can you do as a councilman to try to encourage businesses to help out, to try to get some NGOs involved, to try to get federal funds, all that stuff?
Yeah. You and I have sat through 4 forums together where we took questions, and every single one of those we were asked about affordable housing, and I was stunned to hear 2 candidates say, "Well, there's nothing we can do about that. It's a ship that's already sailed. Prices have gone up. Nothing we can do about that." And I think it's incumbent upon leaders not to say there's nothing we can do about that, but to fight to find an answer. I always tell the story of that. In order to solve problems, you have to start with the approach that we have to a crossword puzzle, a Sudoku, or a Rubik's Cube. You have to start with the belief there is a solution, and then you have to work the problem until you find the solution. There are solutions to problems. And a politician that says, "Oh no, there's nothing we can do about that," shouldn't be in office, or shouldn't run for office. And so specifically on affordable housing, we have a problem, okay? And I tell the story of going and knocking on doors, and one young mother coming to the door and say, "I just got approved for a $450,000 loan, and I cannot find a house in the area." She was on the island for that. And so clearly, and there is nothing for sale on the island in the way of a home. There are some condominiums, but that's under $450,000 right now. What can we do? Well, first, there are federal programs that help with this and that incentivize, give tax credits to developers. The city itself can actually give some tax breaks to developers if they promise to build affordable housing. My thing on that is to force the issue with developers is that it has to be truly affordable housing, not just claim.
So are you open to creating a definition?
Absolutely. Well, there is a federal definition.
Well,
that's
outside
based
that,
on
which
a
people
median
want to ignore.
income.
Like
Yeah.
they all want to stick with this dollar one. And
Right.
and you're right, there is a definition of federal one. Would you want to push that and you can explain it? Or
Yeah.
would you want to go for that dollar one that seems everybody's pushing here locally?
Now, I'm okay with the dollar limit, but I just want to make sure that we ensure that it does become affordable housing, that it stays affordable. It doesn't just immediately get flipped, and now we're back up into the other range. So
So what would your definition of, in terms of dollars, be for an affordable housing? And are you targeting the mother of 2 that's a waitress, or are you targeting the firefighter, husband and wife team that are making $80,000 a year, which most seem to target?
Well, no, I don't think $80,000 is the income that you would target for affordable housing. That's for sure. And I would favor that, if not the federal number, then at least their formula for median income and percentage of that. I mean, housing is a big part of anybody's expenses, and it is expensive, but we can get some affordable housing here. I've been pointing to things like, the city does have that mobile home park. The city does have that holiday apartments condominium complex. I wonder if there is some chance to turn those things in the future toward housing for permanent residents, because they're both mostly being used by snowbirds as little vacation homes. But the city owns that land, has land lease on the condominiums. Maybe we could look at that they need to be sold in the future to people who work here year-round in our service industries, or work for the city, because so many city employees don't live in the city. They have to go and live in Northport or Port Charlotte. I was talking to somebody the other day, told me they drive up here from Port Charlotte, and I'm like, you can't live here in our city? So we have to address that problem.
All right, how about, this is a big issue with our northern Venice folks, and it's the whole open space versus commercial space. And I know there's quasi-judicial being thrown around, so it's up to you how you want to handle it, because So the viewers know the city's basically gone to the candidates and said, quasi-judicial, you can't talk about this. You may not be able to sit and vote on it if it's brought up. So how do you feel on issues like that? You don't have to specifically name the area I'm talking about. How are you on creating more open space, maybe in other areas, like we're doing the park right now? How do you feel about Neil being the one that sold it, and they made a pretty good chunk of money, and then I believe they're going to be the ones developing the park, or he wanted to. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Oh boy,
That's a handful.
yeah, that's like 5 questions
Yeah,
at once.
I like to nail people.
Okay, there is a big issue here. With the land development regulations going forward, they have said that once a developer of a planned unit development comes in with a plan, once he starts to sell, that all the open space that's promised is locked in for 99 years. They can't come back and say, no, we want to use that now for something else. The problem is that we have some existing planned unit developments that don't have that provision. And years after they've sold homes, the developers are coming back and amending their plan with the permission of the city council to take back green space. In the case of out there across from Milano, they're taking green space back and planning to put in a commercial development, a regional shopping center, and a Publix. And you have a developer who's out there saying to that community when he's meeting with them, it's too late for you. I'm going to get what I want from the city council. I always do. And I actually went and spoke to the city council on this issue and said, you should be ashamed of yourself. You know, stand up. This person is tarnishing your image. He's convincing people more and more that you're bought and paid for, and that your honor is at stake. So push back against this in concept at first, but dress down this developer who's saying, I get what I want from this council, just as he would say to me, I get to pick who the candidates are, and you're not it.
Now, I've heard one of the council members say that the LDR is a living, breathable piece of document. And I am assuming they think the same way about the comp plan, because I see a lot of developers come in and just change it at will. Are you for that, or are you for saying, look, we developed this is what the LDRs are, we have to strictly adhere to it, or is there wiggle room for the developer and individuals that bring concerns?
Okay. I believe that the comprehensive plan here is a wonderful document, and I believe changes to it should be rare and only with citywide implications. You don't change a comprehensive plan for one developer, for one idea that he has, for one location that he wants. That's not what a comprehensive plan is. It's a well thought out document about our whole future for the whole city. The same thing with the land development regulations should be thought of in the same way. Changes should be rare and never for the benefit of one developer. I want to talk about those special exceptions, but the city council has final authority over the comprehensive plan, final authority over the land development regulations, and final authority on special exceptions. And what I like to talk about is special exceptions should be for special purposes. The best example of a good special exception was when the little theater came in and said, you know, the height limit here at 35 feet doesn't really work for our stage. We need to be able to fly scenery up behind the stage, and we need lighting up high. And can we get an exception and build higher? And of course the city council said yes, and that was perfectly wise. And we love our little theater. As you know, I was in one of the plays recently there. And it was a great experience. But and we're going to rebuild that. We're not going to lose that building. That's great. But that was a special occasion. It benefited the whole city. The city council is right to give a special exception. But when a developer comes in and says, I know that you're only supposed to build 4 stories here on this, where this condominium is along the water, but I'd like to build 6 stories, and the council says yes, that's wrong. I mean, that's not special. That's not benefiting the whole city. That's lining the pockets of one developer, a developer who's put money into your campaign. That's a conflict that you should be running away from that and never granting that special exception. I think that's, borders on crooked development.
Well, along the lines of LDR, what are your thoughts on Venice Unites and the petition? There's 6 issues that they have. Go.
Okay. When I made my announcement that I was running for council, one of the questions the newspaper asked me was, what do I feel about that referendum, that petition drive downtown? And I said in that very first article that I am sympathetic to the Save Our Downtown group, which is what it was at that time. Mm-hmm. But that as this has developed into a petition drive to overturn the LDR, I have spoken to the city council and said, negotiate with them, do not litigate with them. The council threatened and had their attorney study whether they could sue or stop them from having, direct democracy and a vote on whether these land development regulations should occur. That group has come forward now with just 6 manageable objectives, and the city council, the city manager met with them one time, hasn't met with them since. When I spoke to the council, I said, direct the city manager to go back in there and negotiate a resolution of this. I've signed the referendum drive, put my name on the line there. They're halfway to their goal, which would get it onto the ballot, but I still want it to be resolved. And I believe that it can be resolved if everybody will sit down and talk. That's what I used to do when I was a mediator and a magistrate, is get people to talk and come to a resolution, not always end up in court.
Will the world come to an end if the LDRs, if they get enough signatures, the LDRs, the new ones, have to end, and we have to revert to the old ones that were there for years? Will the world come to an end?
No, it won't come to an end.
Because that's the impression I'm being left with by some people.
We lived under the old regulations for the last 20 years, so why is it going to end all of a sudden if we have to suspend the new regulations? There are some good things in there, and that's the whole reason you negotiate, is, okay, let's put that cap back in on building heights at 35 feet to the flat roof, not this halfway up the peaked roof thing. The demands of that group are all manageable, and maybe they can give a little too in this negotiation. But we have to resolve this. This is the mistake of the city council, was to straight arm these people, to say, oh, you don't understand. Well, if they didn't understand what you're trying to do, it's the council's fault for not educating them. It's the council's fault for not holding enough public meetings and explaining what they're trying to do. It's the council's job to win the people over to what the council wants to do, not to say, too bad, we're doing what we want to do, we don't care what you think. Clearly there's a groundswell here of people who are worried about what that could mean downtown if you increase the building heights. And I'll tell you this, there was a plan to build a 4-story parking garage there on the property in Centennial Park. Now, it's not currently being talked about, but if you do go up another story downtown, you're going to increase the traffic down there by 25 to 50% in terms of the need for more parking, and there'll have to be something done like that parking garage, which would destroy the look of downtown. And so I'm adamantly opposed to increasing the building heights downtown, or to going to 75 feet in the area around the library and over there on Pensacola Road, which was where my first house in Venice was 300 Pensacola.
Well, along those lines, with the LDR, are you concerned about the redevelopment that's being pushed by former Mayor Hollick and some others to redevelop the Seaboard Avenue? And I often deemed it the Riverwalk, which he has back in 2013. So what are your thoughts on that? And is that a concern with the LDRs when the heights come into concern and they start a redevelopment if it pushes through?
Well, the heights there are a concern for me too. I do see that as another opportunity to do something nice in the city along the Seaboard area. Certainly it'd be nice if some of the industrial things there could be in a more remote area instead of right there next to our downtown. But currently, the plan there allows the city to go up to 75 feet in there. And I have said, if there's going to be any high-rise buildings in there, I hope that I would be pushing that they be back away from the road, and that along Venice Avenue, as you're coming in from the interstate, that we don't create a wind tunnel there, 6-story high buildings that you have to go through to get to the island. So I would definitely be hesitant to see these 65, 75-story buildings in there. I do think that there can be some nice things done there. There could potentially be some affordable housing in there, but there'll be also some expensive housing, no doubt, if you're going to build along the intercoastal waterway there. So it's another one of those things like the hospital area that we need some major visioning to take place and planning to take place now before it just unfolds upon us.
What are your thoughts about, this is an issue, a controversial issue. Every time you start to talk about it, you're kind of cut off, and I'm going to let you fly with it, whatever you say. And my group's part of it, as you know, that I belong to in my party, part of the flyers. The first one is the mailers that are going out by Florida First Initiative, which is a Pat Neal Influence PAC. You have those. I know you've discussed with me concerns with what my party's doing, which is a different approach. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go ahead and let you say what you want to say on it.
Okay. Well, the mailers are a clear effort. I'm against an opponent who basically has no campaign except Florida First Initiative mailers, and 7 or 8 of those holding him up and selling him like cereal or soap, saying he's an A-plus candidate. Who says he's an A-plus candidate? Not the League of Women Voters, the developers. And they don't say that. They don't declare that, he's A-plus for developers. Wonderful. When he announced his candidacy, the story in the paper quoted him saying he was pro-growth. As a matter of fact, it quoted him saying, quote, "I am growth," unquote. That's Rick Howard. And Rick Howard pretends that he knows nothing about these flyers. He says he's never met, except one time at a city council meeting, Pat Neal, though Pat Neal told me he met with him and is backing him. Guys are for controlled growth. No, they're not. They're being backed by the big developers in the area because they won't stand up to them, won't manage that growth, won't limit it to what's equitable, but not unlimited. Developers have a right to build on their land, but they don't have a right to buy the council and get special exceptions to build more units than they should, or to build higher than is called for in our planning documents.
Okay, I guess the next question is, as you know, I'm a Republican. Why would I vote for a Democrat? And I'm saying this because it's a concern within a lot of ranks. Why would I cross party lines to vote for you, especially if I have concerns for Rick? Would it be better off just not to vote because I have concerns about all the developer money flowing for him, or try to sell me on why a hardcore Republican like me should vote for you?
I believe there are a lot of Republicans that are going to vote for me. It's a non-partisan race. I really truly believed, and I feel like I hate to think of myself as a naive person, but maybe I was naive when I entered the race thinking that it was a non-partisan race. And I learned real quick, no, we're not going to let you do that. My literature that I put out and that I hand out door to door says Paradise is nonpartisan, and I believe that. It should be a contest for who loves Venice the most, who has the best vision for Venice. It has nothing to do with, somebody asked me this morning, what's my position on abortion? I said, that's not an issue in a city council race. I mean, the seaboard is the issue. What to do with the downtown, and what to do to slow down the speedways, what to do to protect our neighborhoods. Those are all the issues. There's no national political things. Those nasty mailers that the Republican Party sent out about me and that I've been trying to ignore, they're calling me soft on crime. It's like, what? I'm a prosecutor. I trained the police. I carried a badge for 12 years. How can you say that? And of course the newspaper called them to task and said, this was all wrong, slanderous, libelous. I could probably sue and have a court declare that and get a $1, award to me, just along with the fact that it's just not true. They sent out a flyer that said I wrote something, and when the newspaper said, what did he write? And it was something anti-police. And they said, when did he write it? And they said, it was 1996. It was up in Chattanooga. The newspaper went and got it and it was written by somebody else. It wasn't written by me, and the newspaper reported that. They've at least stopped sending these things out because they've been shamed by that kind of newspaper coverage of how misleading and even dishonest that those ads were. But what is that about? I don't understand what the Republican Party's doing in the race. I don't understand that now there's a circular going out with DeSantis getting into the race. I don't understand how they're, choosing between candidates and ignoring what their stances are on issues. So I think that informed voters are going to vote if they're against this runaway growth, if they're against developers saying that they control the city council and they control the planning commission, then they're going to vote accordingly. And I'm very hopeful that people will be discerning, that people will recognize what this Florida First initiative is, and that it is a developer-backed political action committee trying to put into the council people who will let them build indiscriminately.
Yeah, and hopefully a lot of people are seeing what I'm trying to do here is, as a Republican and a REC that sent out a few of those mailers, I didn't personally, my groups did. I wanted to give him an opportunity, and it doesn't make me or my group look good, but I did want to extend that opportunity to you and give you the floor.
I really do appreciate that.
The other thing that I think we missed, and let me know if we missed anything else after this question, you can bring any up, we don't have any on the phone, is the whole annexation question. We've annexed a few properties. Why is it a good thing? Why is it a bad thing? What's your overall view on it?
The city has a pretty good plan for annexation. They have an agreement with the county to annex only in 7 more areas that the county will support them if they do annex, and if the city wants to annex. The city has a boundary that's like a gerrymandered congressional district. It makes no sense. A developer comes along and says, I'd like to build this and be part of the city so I can get water and sewer services and that kind of thing. And as a result, we have this, irregular border. The plan that's been agreed to rounds it out so that it makes it more sense, that it looks more like a city that's, in a rectangle instead of in this gerrymandered state. I'm happy with that plan. What's really, really important is that it be followed and not allow a developer to come in and say, yeah, I know I'm not one of those 7 areas, but I really do think that this would be a nice part of the city. And the city can't just say, yes, that'll give us more revenue. No, you have to provide services. You have to, you have to grow the capacity for water and sewer, but which currently we have enough to cover these new areas that are planned for. But then you have to build a new fire station, and then you have to provide police services out there. So you can't just have one developer come in and go, let's just add this to what's already there. This is a well thought out plan. I favor annexing in those areas that will round out the borders of the city and not put additional strains on the services that we can provide.
That does bring up a question, though. You mentioned fire, and I remember when I talked to some of those guys, they said right now we have 2 people on a truck, and the burden is strong. We're under a lot of pressure because there's only 2 of us. We do have a ton of people moving into the area, a ton of developments, a ton of new houses. My understanding from them was that we possibly needed another truck. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's inevitable we're going to need more. Especially as we continue to annex. So I don't have a problem with that. We do have, we have tremendous services. They're high quality, and the city prides itself on providing a high level of service. Just like with the ambulance, when they took over the ambulance service, that has been a huge success in the city. People are happy with that. Response times are better, and that actually has not cost the city money. Now, they did actually raise the tax rate, but only by the same amount that the millage rate went down when it was taken out of the county. So that it was a net even proposition in terms of your tax rate. But I understand that that's being run again in a enterprise way, and that they're actually profiting on the ambulance service in that they have a very high collection rate on use of the ambulance in the city, because we are a fairly prosperous community and people are insured. So they do collect at a very high rate, and it's not creating a financial burden on the city. So these things can be managed, and we can provide more services and keep them at a high level.
All right, any subjects that I missed that you wanted to touch on?
No, I did want to mention I'm very, very proud to have gotten an endorsement from the North Venice Neighborhood Alliance, and one of my platforms is that I want to help neighborhoods. And I was asked at our very first forum, what hill would you be willing to die on? And I said, I'll die on a hill fighting for neighborhoods. And fighting for neighborhoods that are, whether they're downtown or whether they're in the central corridor or whether they're in the northern subdivisions, everybody's under pressure. Some of them are trying to slow down these speedways through residential areas. Some of them are trying to push back on the commercial encroachment. Some of them are trying to keep building heights down. But every one of those groups deserves to be heard. I went before the city council and asked them to start doing neighborhood workshops. And I said, if you can't, I know you're busy, if you can't do a workshop in each one of the neighborhoods that are identified in the comprehensive plan, then at the very least, take the city council meetings on the road. You have 2 a month. Every month, take one of those meetings and hold it at a clubhouse at Sawgrass, or go out there to where we were at the Venice Golf and River Club and hold it in their beautiful facility there.
How about yourself, though? One thing that struck me as fascinating is that a council member at one of the forums said that he does not go in the neighborhoods to meet with people because that's the mayor's job, and we pretty much had a lame duck mayor for 3 years.
That was your
Would you do that as a councilor?
Absolutely.
All right.
That's your opponent who said that, and it was
Well, I didn't
stunning.
want to say that.
He's been in office for 3 years, and he said, I'm going to start to meet people. And he said, I thought I would be really busy as a city council person, but I only get 1 call a day. You only get 1 call a day from one constituent, and you're on the city council for 3 years? That means you're not out there. I shook hands with 200 people this morning out there at Bay Indies, and where was he? I mean, this way you have to go to the people. You're not only entitled to do that if you're mayor, you can do that as a city council person, and I'm proposing that the whole council go out there every month to a new neighborhood and listen to the people. People keep telling me that they don't think they're heard by the city council. They say they write an email and they get no response. I don't know how that's possible. I don't understand why you want to be on the council if you don't want to be communicating with the residents. I don't understand it. Makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I was shocked to hear that too. What else do you have there? Anything else? Did I miss anything? I try to remember everything that is important right now that's on everybody's mind.
Yeah, no, I think we've hit all the big highlights. I was disappointed, that the newspapers didn't interview the candidates, didn't endorse anyone.
Yeah, that was surprising. The Gondo always endorses, and as I have discussed with you, many people, they threatened to shut me out of business, to file suit against me, and that was the old owners, and the old owners told the new owners that, and the new owners are under the impression that I'm a jerk. So I personally never talked to them or interviewed, but I'm surprised they didn't talk to anyone else and endorse. They usually endorse my opponent, which really surprised me that they didn't do it this time, which tells me something. But
right, I give them a pass only in the sense that they've had a tremendous burden in covering the storm and the damage and the aftermath, and that's where their limited resources are being spent. But I'm an old newsman, I think I said I came here to be the local news editor for the Herald Tribune. And I'm shocked that the local paper ran a story announcing my candidacy. They ran a story announcing my opponent's candidacy, and there has not been one single story in the paper about the campaign. They didn't cover a single debate. They didn't interview us and endorse for their readers. They actually didn't run one single story. I've never heard of a local newspaper that could ignore a city council race or a mayoral race.
But who's been covering it? That's
the scoop. It's on the scoop. I'm telling you, you're one of the 3 big sources of information in the city, and you covered the election better than anybody. The Herald Tribune had the same challenges, but by my count, they've run at least 4 major stories about the race. They covered Pat Neal's, bribe of me. They covered Pat Neal's unusual relationship with the city council, where he's suing them to get money out of the building permit fund, where he's sued them in the past. Mayor Hollick was quoted in that article saying he's lost faith in Pat Neal because Pat Neal seems to be in it just for himself now. They covered that first forum that we had, the big forum with the Rotary Club, the Civitan Club. It wasn't Civitan, it was Sertoma. And also the Tiger Bay Club. All of them together filled the ballroom at the Hotel Venezia. They covered that story. Then Earl Kimmel came back and ran another story on the last 3 debates that we had in a 5-day period and tried to give us some coverage. So they've done a better job, but they also have chosen not to endorse and not to interview the candidates, and that's disappointing to me. And I'm thrilled that you would do it. And I'm ashamed of Mr. Howard that he wouldn't talk to you.
Yeah, and if anyone's getting on now, I texted him and Ron yesterday, said, would you like to interview? Rick did not get back to me. I saw him at the library and I said, you never got back to me. And he just said no and turned away. And I'm like, oh, okay.
No,
and he didn't know that I had concerns with anything because I kept my mouth shut to everyone about my concerns with Rick and you and your race.
Mm-hmm.
So
anyway, I'm glad to be here. I thank you for the opportunity, and I am a reader.
All right, where can they go to find more info? I did put your website on here. I tried to put Rick's and I want to be transparent, and he's also my party, but he doesn't. I couldn't find one. So if
he
Rick
has no
wants
campaign. It's the Florida First. I told you the incumbent is Pat Neal. He's who I'd have to congratulate were I to lose. There is no campaign by Rick Howard. There is just mailers from the development community promoting him as wanting to control growth. So it's an insult to the intelligence of the voters, and I think they're smarter than that.
All right.
Thank you, Frankie.
Yep, let me turn it towards me now. I can see the end switch. All right, so I did put Ron's info for his website. Rick, I couldn't get it. If somebody knows it and they can get it to me, send it, but I've talked to people and nobody knows where it is. I did put up my disclaimers because I am a candidate, but I did this as a publisher and I wanted to make that clear. And then I also wanted to make it clear that Ron and I are in the same party, so I didn't want any issues there with people reading between lines. So that's it. Share this, do whatever you want with it. Just make sure you get out. Early voting is today and tomorrow at the Venice Library or South County Courthouse. Then it's Tuesday. People like myself will go in on Tuesday and vote. So what's most important is that you get out and cast your vote and you let your voice be heard. All right, everybody, have a good day.